Back at it again. It's another edition, The State of Football, Part 8. We've been breaking it down since last week, examining the cause and effect, the trickle down, the rumors, the myths, the outlooks, the prognostications. We're trying to digest it all. Hard-hitting topics. How does the state of football look between now and really the entire cycle? And that's leading up to the draft. Is there a draft in April? Is it pushed back? We're going to break it all down here today. It seems like every day is trickling news. And the big news yesterday, before we get to that, RIC in the place to be, Ric Serritella, telling it like it is since 2002. You know how we do at the NFLDraftBible.com. Please check it out. We've got some great things ahead. Of course, we've had Neil Stratton for the last couple days this week, InsideTheLeague.com. A valuable resource and tool in the industry, InsideTheLeague.com. Of course, his blog, too, Succeed in Football. It's self-explanatory, folks. You want to succeed in football, you work in football, you aspire to work in football. Neil's giving it all out there. Neil, good morning, sir. And then, of course, John Murphy in Toronto with the Argonauts, the CFL Lifeline. Maybe we'll get into some of that today. I'm hearing that maybe it can be resurrected. I sure hope so. But let's go back to the college football landscape, fellas. And really, it seems like it just became official yesterday that the Big Ten is killing the season or pushing it back to the spring. And I feel like we've been so far out in front of this thing because we've kind of heard the whispers and the rumblings. It was a done deal. And now, the Pac-12 is out. We know this. And now the AAC is standing put. The Big 12 put out a statement just this morning that they're still examining the options. A fall season is still on the table. So, John, we still have the SEC in play, the ACC, the Big 12, and now the AAC. Shout out to our friend Phil Steele, who couldn't join us yesterday. Hey, AAC, the All-American Conference, they get their wish now. They're with the powers that be. But, I mean, is this even feasible? Is this a legal nightmare waiting to happen? And how does a fall season, spring season combination even fit into a calendar?
Well, if the plan is that, the best of what you'll win this year is your conference, then I think it's, people can decide when their optics fit best for them. I still think there's a dramatic amount of things behind the scenes that often get overlooked and not spoken about. We've mentioned them, the scheduling, the number of fields, that you would have, the idea that, you see it happening for, both pro and con. If they have to play, everyone has to play, right? Title IX. If they're not playing, you're seeing them do the opposite of that, which is you don't see anybody just canceling football. They're canceling fall sports because, breaking news, football is paying for the other fall sports. So the three people that are going to the field hockey game can go to the field hockey game is because football is paying for it. Not to be funny, but the reason that you don't get charged for some other sports, the reason why you've seen, them have these dramatic improvements on a lot of campuses for Olympic sports, for women's sports, the TV deals and everything, that all kind of goes away along with a lot of other things if you don't have the money and the TV money that goes into this. So, I mean, some of it has to be that they're deciding that there's either a reason or a push behind it, or it's just going to be that they are just scrambling because they're afraid of I don't believe it's the first or a potential second wave of COVID. I think they feel like that would be controllable even if you were playing with a few different people one week to the next, because of that. I really believe it's the secondary things that they don't know enough about yet. And the factor that you've had a Major League Baseball pitcher be told not to play this season because of that. A guy that's, a real name, a real guy, there for the Boston Red Sox. The factor that they're seeing some issues, with no bubble, which you would not have that, in college, even though you'd only have the players and the staff on campus. You still got kids, that are going to go around and walk around and do do their thing when they're not, in school or on the practice field. I really believe what the team presidents are doing is the insurance or the liability that you get a kid on your campus sick, and it's beyond repair. I think that's what's pushing this to the spring.
Yeah, and Neil, we heard too with the Pac-12, what really spooked out some of the school presidents is this evidence now that there is lung scarring, there is respiratory issues that can occur, lingering effects from the COVID, and that was really kind of the deciding factor for the Pac-12. That was like, hey, you know what? Maybe we'll stand down, we'll push it to the spring. But we were having an interesting conversation in terms of how all this can tie into the All-Star games. But, Neil, to the point of moving to the spring, I don't buy it. I don't buy it because what John is saying that, hey, now you've got to play all the fall sports and all the spring sports together, that's not even logistically possible. Secondly, unless there's a vaccine, we're not necessarily any different in the spring than we are right now. And to me, it's like, we're having this false hope again that, hey, we're going to move it to the spring. I'm not so sure just from the COVID alone not going away that they'll still be able to kind of manufacture. To Russ's point last week, the NCAA is not being run by very competent people right now. I mean, I don't have confidence for them to even get this thing situated by the spring.
Well, I think as we discussed kind of before we got on this call, Rick, we're now at the point, I think there are two approaches here. Do we try to play in the face of this, or do we wait for a vaccine? And I think it's one or the other. I'm not sure. I don't know that anyone's given us a real timetable on a vaccine, or if it's even going to be able to, solve this thing, quite frankly. I mean, I think vaccines, the flu shot and what have you, are not impermeable. They're not invincible. They're not anything. So I guess the question becomes, how do you get past the liability issue that you mentioned? I don't know what the answer is there. I'm not an attorney. I'm not any of those kind of things. But if we wait on a vaccine, this could be something. I mean, I think spring is incredibly optimistic. Maybe fall of 2021 is in jeopardy. To me, we've got to find a way to live with this thing. I know nobody wants to talk about herd immunity, but I don't know how long we as a nation and as a culture kind of hit pause and hope that we can reset things with minimal damage. We already know that we're going to do financial damage to the schools, and that's much bigger than football. But even looking at football, how do we reformat the recruiting cycles? I don't think anyone's discussed that, and I'm not an expert on that kind of thing, but I know that that's a big part of the spring and into second quarter of the year and what have you. There are just such far-reaching implications by stopping football, and it's not going to be easy to start it back up. There's going to be a lot of salaries that are cut. There's going to, the economic ramifications. I haven't seen any articles. I haven't seen any stories. I tweeted this morning that do NFL teams start furloughing West Coast scouts? I'm getting pushback on that, and that's good. I hope that they don't. God knows I'm not rooting for that. But it seems like scouting rooms are the first place that NFL teams want to cut every time. Every time. John's nodding his head. He knows I'm right. That would be a travesty to me, but who knows what happens? It's just, once again, you can't just throw a pebble in the water without it creating, waves. And in this case, shock waves from having major conferences decide they're not going to play.
Well, as a matter of fact, I think it might have been Inside the League where I read that there was fewer scout hirings than any other offseason ever, basically. So
absolutely right. Yeah, they're asking scouts to do more pro stuff now. They're hiring more analytics people, which typically means fewer scouts because they're hoping they can do stuff with computers that they can't do with good old boots on the ground. And someone that's kind of an advocate for scouts and someone who really tracks the industry, that's not good news.
Yeah, and John, I talked to a lot of scouts that really planned on hopping on board with teams, and the team said, "Hey, we're just standing down right now." Unfortunately, it looks like maybe next year type of thing. And, we've even had some people from the Draft Bible interview with teams and tell them that, like, hey, we're actually just weeding guys out for next year, so that when we do this process next year, we've already eliminated, the guys that we don't need to talk to. So that's an interesting angle. What Neil talks about, the recruiting, what becomes a violation, what becomes allowed, the visits, that's a whole nother dynamic in a mess. And, I think too, with the player safety, MLB, I saw now is discussing a playoff bubble. So when they do get to the playoffs, they're kind of almost admitting a mistake here with the whole Marlins fiasco. Like, hey, you know what? Maybe a bubble might have been the safer play. Oh, by the way, we are already discussing doing that for the playoff format. So, whatever direction you want to go there, Johnny, there's a lot to digest.
Yeah, no doubt. And, as you mentioned, are you going to have high school kids? Are they going to want to go back? If they can play in the spring, that's a different story. But are they going to want to go back? Are they going to want to be told by the NCAA, hey, everything's being moved back a year? Like, in other words, halt the process, go back to high school for another year, type thing. Are they going to have an entire, class basically redshirting? And if so, how many smaller or lesser universities might benefit from the kid who says, well, like, I'm not going to go redshirt at Alabama, or I'm not going to go redshirt, at Oregon, when I can, just jump to another, a lesser program that's offering me a scholarship, but is offering me a faster plateau or platform, to get to the pro sport that I'm aiming towards. And now I think you got the NCAA in a much broader picture has lost at minimum $500 million with no March Madness, and now is going to potentially turn around and eat another 500 plus, way plus on something like this. So the other part of just saying, well, we'll play in the spring is the equivalent of saying, people who have gotten benefits for the past 9 weeks or past 6 months and haven't saved any of it and haven't paid any of their bills, when those bills come due, where's the money? Because just saying you're going to play in the spring still means that you had to test these kids, still means that you have to have the same rules and regulations and everything in place. And it's heading toward another topic I know we want to get to, but if you send 100 college kids back to wherever they would go back to, not on campus, well, the good news is they may build up their immunity. The bad news is the way that they would be building up their immunity, because they would be all over the place with the hours that they would have. So, when you talk about what you would have to do to play a fall schedule, you're talking about having to get those kids back in school, back in training, in a return to play type program, so you don't hurt them or injure them, from that standpoint. But you're still having to test all these guys. You're still having to come up with ways to insulate them, on a college, campus, and such. So to me, the bigger issue is you keep pushing this backward, is okay from an ideal standpoint, and it's good for topic of conversation. At some point, in order to play, the bill is going to come due to pay for that. And where is that money coming from if you have in back-to-back times taken out the NCAA tournament and now the start of regular college football, and it would seem inevitable by them delaying fall sport? When exactly are college basketball players going to be allowed back on campus? Because we mentioned it a little bit yesterday. Is it feasible right now to think they don't have a way to ensure 100 kids on campus doing this for football? Are we going to, in the next 6 months, get to the point where it'll be safe to have 6, 8, 10 different sports teams and all of those male and female students on campus, in dorms, around needing access to the weight room, the trainers, the cafeteria, and all those things? There, there's a lot of puzzle pieces there, and at some point, the shift in scheduling and money could become an internal power struggle between NCAA basketball, NCAA football, and that's a whole other story that'll be interesting to see, how it gets to. But I think the big thing, is will you see a group that just says, like standing still with our bubble, doing it right now, when we feel confident, okay, kind of like the perfect storm, you either had to head toward deeper water or head toward the shore, and you're going to see some people try to head home, and you're going to see some people try to head for deeper water.
Well, I'll tell you what, you see the SEC stand pat and try to execute a season, and they have to fold the deck and cancel the season. There will be no spring football for anybody because that'll be the guinea pig experiment.
But one thing for sure. Somewhere behind the scenes, someone is being solicited to eat the bullet.
Sure,
There's not a shadow of a doubt that they would want somebody to take that boat and go to deeper water if they could. Because of the factor that if you can get over that hump, now you've shown everyone else how to do it.
Sure.
Because you watch now, right? You saw the Saints talk about what they were doing downtown New Orleans, right? They were going to bubble, have enough rooms for everybody, players, staff, GM, like anybody who wanted one could do it. And now what comes out yesterday? What are the Cowboys doing? Same exact thing. And if that starts to work, guess what you're going to get? You could sell a bunch of guys on $1 in a dream if the dream is a big enough situation, right?
Yeah,
so when you see LSU saying we'll play, come hell or high water, wherever and whatever you want us to do, all you need is a fraction of people to agree, because we all know, like I said, LSU and these teams love the schedules that they have. But as soon as they ran into high water, you saw Notre Dame run to an ACC schedule to have a schedule on paper. So you really only need 20 or 24 quality teams throughout the country and a few stragglers that might hold on to stay with them to go about doing things to play what would be considered at least a reasonable NCAA schedule in the fall.
So, a couple things there. I will say this, and I hear like the teams are going to rent out the top 4 floors of a hotel, and I kind of chuckle at that because it's like, okay, well, you've got your guys in the bubble on the top 4 floors at a hotel, but what about the other 40 floors? And they have to share those elevators, right? And they're getting food from the same places, right? And the hotel has employees that go home and live their life and hit the strip clubs and go to the bars, and they come back and serve food to these players. So, I kind of chuckle if that's the right solution. I'm not here to provide a better answer at this point in time. So I think it's better than the alternative, which is, hey, everybody go back and live your life. And it is to the next point that I want to discuss, Neil, is, and it's funny when you see these announcements come down the wire, the Big Ten postpones the season, the Pac-12 postpones the season. If you just read a couple comments, I mean, it's 50-50 from what I see. People are either like, oh, great move, I applaud that, or you have the, hashtag let them play people, or we saw Justin Fields and Trevor Lawrence, we want to play. And their argument is, well, hey, guess what? Because we're taking these precautions, we're actually safer with our teams than we are living our really daily, regular lives. And, say what you want, take the political sides out of it. The president of the United States even says this would be a tragic mistake to cancel the season. Say what you want about the president. He's a divisive guy also. But the way that America, just like our politics, is so split and divided on this issue, it's really captivating when I see these comments. So my question is, we're going to play a little game. Fact or fiction, we're no doctors. We have stayed at a few Holiday Inns. But in your opinion, Neil, are college football players truly safer in that kind of environment, being with their teams, being under guidelines, protocol, and supervisions?
I think clearly the answer is yes. I think if we want to talk about quarantines, if we want to talk about lockdowns, if we want to talk about putting some people, kind of cordoning them off from everyone else, you mentioned the fact that there are, even if they stay in a hotel with the top 4 floors, they're still going to be serviced by people who aren't in a bubble. But I think that's the closest you're going to come to something like that. I think undeniably people are safer, these kids are safer being at the schools than going out and being with the general population. I don't know if that's enough to warrant playing the games. I think it is. And obviously these kids want to. I think at some point, I hate to say this, but there is an economy of risk here. And I think if we make a good faith effort to, again, quarantine them from everywhere else and give them a chance and give them access to the best medical facilities that you're going to find anywhere, where else are you? How could you argue that they're not in the best circumstances? That's my feeling.
John, your thoughts?
Yeah, and I think, to go with what you were saying, now I'm not sure you could do this with even the money that the colleges and NCAA has, but when it comes to at least the Saints, and I'm guessing the Cowboys would then be the same, where the Saints are, that's not, a bubble or whatever. They are 100% being sequestered in the sense of they've just done the hotel. Like, that's all that's in there is 150 to 200 Saints only people. So the only other people that are interacting with them, are whether they have a check-in process, which you could eliminate, and technically you can eliminate the food aspect of it by them either using their own people 20 minutes away at the Saints complex to cook it all, prep it all, and you're going to get a knock on the door and 3 boxes in a bag. You could. I'm not saying that's how you would do it, but you could get almost everything to be, we go on the bus, we go to practice, they then clear the practice area, they then are cleaning the buses, then they're, clearing the elevators. And logically, if you're around just some of those 150 to 200 people, and you're all testing clear and you're all in the same environment all the time, you're probably going to limit the number of positive test results the way that you've seen it happen with almost all of the bubbles, that the stuff they've done with major sports. I'm not sure that any NCAA program, even the top ones, could they create that type of environment by taking out the trips to the cafeteria, having to do food prep and delivery differently? You could. I think there's a way to organize that, like whether it would be there just on a table on the way out after practice. I think there's things that they could do in a dynamic, right? Give the kids a 6-pack of water and a 6-pack of Gatorade, and hopefully they're not drinking a 6-pack of something else in their room, But I think you can do some logical things to help these kids not kind of do the interaction that they would normally want to do, provide them with the information. And like I said, the number one thing that will make people buy in is the buy-in of not what at risk medically, that no one knows enough about. And these kids don't, I'm not saying they don't care. They don't know enough to know if they should. But the one thing you do know at what's at risk is we're trying to do something collectively like what LSU is doing, right? Like what these kids are saying about wanting to play. The first dingbat that gets caught wandering around campus or doing something, first off, they're going to make such a big deal out of it that kid's going to be, apologizing for it for the rest of his life. But secondly, he's going to get kicked out for the year, because of that. And so I think that's why you haven't seen anybody, at least it hasn't been released, getting suspended or getting these jacked up fines. You've seen what the Indians have done. They threw half of their starting pitching staff on, suspended or other, for going outside and getting a meal or doing whatever they did, on their off day, in Chicago last week. So, I mean, you know that that's how these people are responding to it. And if you're in a team environment, then you are responsible for yourself and your behavior, but also the person to the left of you, right of you, ahead, behind, whatever. I think that the players would be in that way safer because there's so many more checkpoints than if I'm at home. Mom and dad are just going to tell me what I should or shouldn't do. Okay, hopeful that they're doing the right thing, but they're still going to try to go out and work out. They're still going to try to go, do some action with their teammates or others, around. They're still going to try to go to a field and catch footballs and whatever. And again, just throw and catch a football and tell me how many different ways you could contract something. Lots. Whereas in an environment in a university where they're cleaning them, they're using new ones, you have gloves, you have, some different things that I'm sure they would put into place for safety. Whether you play or not, being on campus probably has, like I said, a lot more checkpoints to it. And the one other thing that a couple of people have mentioned is, how comfortable are we treating them as student athletes when it is logical or when it's convenient? But then when there's no money to be made, we send these same student athletes home, and if they contract COVID at home, they're on their own. If you're contracting it at the university, you are covered as a student athlete. Do you really feel comfortable saying that if we send these kids home and any of them get it, they're not getting the medical coverage that they had before? And to me, that's going to be difficult, because we all know that there would probably be a very high percentage or a significant percentage of these kids who, if they were under their parents' medical, would not be receiving the same level of treatment that they would if they walked in as a university of such and such student.
Well, I do think that the bubble idea is safer, right? And I think it can work at the pro level, because these players in return are receiving a form of compensation. But listening to John talk, Neil, the one word he said that kind of stands out, and it came up a couple times, is the kids. These are kids, and some of them are teenagers. And, how realistic is it? I mean, I just have to look in my own backyard. Rutgers is practicing. They're supposed to be in quarantine. They go hit a campus dorm party or whatever, a frat party, and all of a sudden, 20 guys come down with the COVID. I mean, how realistic is that for kids around the country to just say, hey, I'm going to stay inside the bubble for the next several months and not be a teenager, not be a college student? I don't know. I have my doubts. I think looking back at myself, 20 years old, I might be concerned about myself.
You're right, Rick. I mean, it's not going to be an easy sell to these kids, and or for the coaches, for that matter, who have families, for members of the staff. It's not going to be an easy sell, but I would hope that people would look at it as a worthy sacrifice of the next 2 to 3 months of their lives. And, and again, I don't mean to make a bigger issue of this perhaps than it is, but I mean, at some point, we've got to make some sacrifices so we can go on with our lives. I think some sense of normalcy is so important. And if you were to make that short-term sacrifice, I think it's a selfless thing to do, I guess is what I'm trying to say. And it would help so many other people to, again, have some semblance of normalcy, to be able to kind of look and see, hey, look, life is going on. I can go on with my life as well if I'm smart about it and I don't make any dumb decisions and try to be a little, make my own sacrifices. Maybe people would take something from that, and I think would not be easy, but I also don't think it'd be mission impossible.
All right, well, on that note, we're going to come to an end here, a little abbreviated show. We have some other topics. We'll be back tomorrow where we really will have David Turner and Ryan Roberts. We'll also have Mook Williams. We have a couple of topics we didn't get to today, the CFL being one of them. John, we'll kind of pick your brain on where you guys are at there. Also, I thought it was interesting, Fox showing interest in the newborn XFL. As you guys know, a TV deal will be critical for their survival. We'll try to dig into a little bit of what that all means. Of course, a great panel with John Murphy and Neil Stratton. And Neil, we've got to get a Super Bowl pick on record from you here, brother. We are optimistic that we're going to get through an NFL season here at the very least, and we're rooting for that at the NFL Draft Bible. So hit us with a prediction. I have a feeling I know who one of the teams might be.
And Justin stole my thunder yesterday. I got a little problem with him, but yeah, I like the Chiefs and the Saints. I'm a Saints guy myself. I know John has New Orleans roots as well. I always laugh about how so many of us in this business have New Orleans roots. It must be because it's always wait till next year time for the Saints for the first 20 years of their existence. But anyway, I like the Saints and I like the Chiefs, and I'm hoping my Saints can do it. I'm going to go on record and say it's going to be a Who Dat Super Bowl this year, and they're going to pull it off. Drew's last season.
There you go. Breeze would be going in the route of John Elway, going out a winner with the Super Bowl, because I think he has a TV contract, broadcasting career waiting lined up for him. So, hey, Neil, great stuff. Once again, hit the people at home. They can follow you at Inside the League. Of course, the website, InsideTheLeague.com, and you have the Succeed in Football blog year-round. But for those seeing you for the first time, give them a little summary about what it is you all do over there.
Our book, my book, Scout Speak, should be out in a couple weeks. We're hoping it'll be on Amazon. We've already got Moving the Chains, which is a breakdown of the NFL draft process, especially for parents of players. And I recommend you register for our Friday wrap. We have 5,000 people across the industry, John and Rick and a lot of other people that read us every week. We break down the football issues. It's for people who are fans of the business, maybe more so than strictly their own teams. And you can find registration for that on our Twitter account. So we'd love to have you as readers and just help us work with us as we look at the business of the game, just like Rick and John and so many others do.
Yeah, and we'd love to get you back here to talk about the new book. Of course, the first book, Moving the Chains, is basically a study guide on a player, parent, anybody who wants to learn how to navigate the draft process. That book is more valuable now than ever before. So if you are a player eligible for this upcoming draft cycle, do yourself a favor, go to Amazon. It'll be the best, $13 or whatever it is right now that you ever spend. And the other thing, we'll talk more about this when we have you on. The new book, Scout Speak, correct? Mm-hmm. Is going to have some tales from the scouting trails, I believe.
And I'm laughing just thinking about some of them. There's some funny ones in there. There's some interesting ones in there. There's some interesting opinions that are expressed. It was a lot of fun to write and put together, and I think people have a lot of fun reading it too.
All right, he's Neil Stratton. Make sure you check him out. That Friday wrap is invaluable. I always look forward to that hitting my inbox and immediately just gravitate towards that thing. So great work, Neil. A great friend of ours. We appreciate the time as always. Johnny, maybe we'll get some tales from the scouting trails out of you tomorrow.
Yeah, when we had Turner on last week, I said the best one that I've ever heard was sitting at the combine a good time ago back now, and somebody said hey, this is the one situation you don't ever want to put yourself in. Al Davis going around the room had a player that he just loved. Everybody in the room knew that it was his guy for the draft. And Al said, okay, one more time. I want to hear everybody's reports on the top 10 guys or so. And he said, he mentioned the name of the player, who's got Joe Jones. And one guy's got his hand up. One guy's got his hand up. One guy's got his hand up. He's not calling on him. He's not calling on him. The guy, me, right here, me. He's like, anybody else in the room have a report on this guy? Everybody else is quiet. He goes, basically, oh, shit, all right, I guess you go. And everybody in the room started laughing because they knew that, Al just didn't like how his reports read. So he knew what he was about to get. And that's not what Al wanted to hear that day. So, if anything, it tells you, a lot of those stories on the road, are meant and shared with guys who literally spent their life on the road, and I think that's one of the best parts of, of what a book like that can mean. Something that we started, down at the Texas First Nation All-Star Game and Neil has picked up on and run with and continued, doing the Scout of the Year, a part of the business that's, usually overlooked and underrated. And then when it comes time to make pay cuts or substitutions, that's the number one place in the business they go to. And that's a time for another show. But just realize one thing, the NFL, which is a Forbes 100, 500, top 10 business in the world, actually spends the least percentage of their money on what would be considered their number one resource, which is scouting.
Research and development. Absolutely right.
Well, these guys have broken it all down. And yes, John's correct. The Inside the League Scouting Combine seminar held during the week of the Scouting Combine in Indianapolis is the premier networking event for the football industry. So if you work in the business, trying to break into the business, again, go check out Inside the League. Of course, check out NFLDraftBible.com for all of our guests here today, John Murphy, Neil Stratton, and of course, Ric Serritella. We'll be back at it again tomorrow, same time, 9 a.m. Till the next time, everybody.